"Could you save my twin little sisters?" Little boy asked. What Hell's Angel did next stunned everyone. The early morning sun barely broke through the heavy clouds as Marcus Kane leaned against his motorcycle outside Rusty's roadside diner. The small establishment sat lonely on the highway, its neon open sign flickering weakly against the gray dawn. Steam rose from the cup of black coffee in Marcus's weathered hands, warming his fingers against the autumn chill. At 45, Marcus wore his years like battle scars. His leather vest displayed the distinctive Hell's Angels patches that had defined him for over 2 decades. Deep lines etched his face, mapping a journey through hard choices and harder consequences. The silver streaks in his dark beard caught the weak sunlight as he took a long sip of coffee. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just his Harley, a dusty pickup, and the waitress's compact car. Marcus preferred it this way. Quiet, solitary, uncomplicated. "Refill, sugar?" the waitress called from the doorway, coffee pot in hand. Marcus shook his head. "I'm good, Donna. Thanks." Donna nodded and disappeared back inside, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. They weren't pleasant company these days. Last night's dreams had brought back memories of Lisa, his younger sister. 20 years gone now, but the pain remained fresh. He'd failed to protect her when it mattered most. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The highway stretched empty in both directions, disappearing into the morning mist. Marcus took another sip of coffee, feeling the familiar hollow ache in his chest. This was his life now. Moving from town to town, never staying long enough to form connections, riding with brothers who respected his leadership but knew little of his past. His phone buzzed. A message from Reaper about tonight's meeting at the clubhouse 3 towns over. Marcus typed a quick reply, confirming he'd be there, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. The club was the closest thing to family he had left. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something to belong to. A semi-truck rumbled past, breaking the silence and sending ripples across the surface of his coffee. Marcus watched it disappear around the bend, its taillights glowing red before fading into nothing. That was life, here then gone, leaving barely a trace. He drained the last of his coffee and crushed the cup in his fist. Time to move on. Another nameless day in a string of nameless days. Another highway, another destination that didn't really matter. As Marcus swung his leg over his Harley, he caught his reflection in the motorcycle's chrome. A stranger stared back, hollow-eyed and grim. When had he become this man? When had the road become more familiar than any home? He remembered a time when his laugh came easily, when hope felt like something within reach, rather than a fairy tale for other people. Back when Lisa was alive, when they'd talk about getting out, building something better. Those dreams had died with her. Marcus ran his hand over the bike's fuel tank, feeling the cool metal beneath his calloused palm. The machine was reliable, predictable. It asked nothing from him but maintenance and fuel. No emotional demands, no disappointments, no judgment for the man he'd become. He inserted the key, but didn't turn it. Instead, he sat there, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on him. How long could a man live this way? Empty, disconnected, just existing. The sound of a car door slamming drew his attention to the diner. A middle-aged couple emerged, heading toward a blue sedan. They walked close, the man's arm around the woman's shoulders, their heads bent together in quiet conversation. Something about their easy intimacy made Marcus look away. That kind of connection wasn't meant for men like him. He'd made his choices long ago. Marcus was about to start his bike when something across the road caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, or maybe a small animal. But as he focused, he realized it was a child, a small boy stumbling toward him. The kid looked no more than 6, his clothes disheveled, his face streaked with dirt. What grabbed Marcus's attention wasn't just the boy's appearance, but what he carried. Clutched awkwardly in his small arms were two tiny bundles that seemed to be moving. Marcus froze, his hand still on the key. The boy staggered forward, his eyes locked on Marcus with a desperation that cut through years of carefully cultivated indifference. A child's desperate plea. Marcus watched as the small boy stumbled toward him across the empty parking lot. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, his thin frame nearly buckling under the weight of what he carried. Two small bundles were cradled awkwardly in his skinny arms, wrapped in what looked like worn baby blankets, one faded pink, the other a dingy yellow. The bundles squirmed and made soft mewling sounds. Babies. The kid was carrying babies. For a moment, Marcus sat frozen on his motorcycle, his mind struggling to process the scene unfolding before him. Children weren't part of his world. They belonged to the normal people, the ones who lived in houses with picket fences and took family photos at Christmas. Not to men who wore club colors and lived life on the edges of society. The boy's face was streaked with dirt and what might have been dried tears. His brown hair stuck up in wild tufts, and his blue t-shirt was torn at one shoulder. The jeans he wore were smudged with grass stains and what looked disturbingly like blood at one knee. "Hey, kid!" Marcus called, finally finding his voice. "You all right?" The boy didn't answer. He just kept coming, his eyes locked on Marcus with an intensity that was unsettling. As he got closer, Marcus could see that the child was trembling from head to toe, whether from exhaustion, fear, or cold he couldn't tell. "Damn it," Marcus muttered under his breath as he swung his leg over his bike and stood up. This wasn't his business. Whatever trouble the kid was in, there were proper channels. Police, social services, churches. Places better equipped to handle children in distress than a Hell's Angel with a past full of regrets. But the boy kept coming, and something in those determined eyes wouldn't let Marcus just walk away. One of the bundles let out a high-pitched cry. The sound seemed to trigger something in Marcus. A memory of another child from long ago. Lisa had cried like that when she was scared. "Whoa, easy there," Marcus said, closing the distance between them with long strides. Up close, he could see the full state of the boy. His shoes were mismatched, one sneaker and one rubber boot. His face wasn't just dirty. There was a bruise forming along his jawline. His eyes were wide with fear, but burning with determination. "You need help, kid." "Where's your mom?" Marcus asked, scanning the area for any sign of an adult who might belong with these children. The boy's arms were shaking visibly now, struggling with the weight of the two infants. Marcus instinctively reached out, afraid the kid might drop the babies. "I can take one of those," he offered gruffly. The boy hesitated, clutching the infants closer to his chest despite his obvious fatigue. "It's okay," Marcus said, softening his tone. "I'm not gonna hurt them." After a moment's consideration, the boy reluctantly extended his arms, offering one of the bundles, the one in the pink blanket, to Marcus. With more gentleness than most people would believe him capable of, Marcus took the infant, carefully supporting its head the way he vaguely remembered you were supposed to. The baby couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its tiny face was scrunched up, eyes closed, wisps of dark hair peeking out from the blanket. "They're my sisters," the boy finally spoke, his voice small and hoarse, as if he hadn't used it in a while. "They're twins." Marcus knelt down to be at eye level with the boy, still cradling the infant. The second baby, still in the boy's arms, began to whimper. "Where are your parents, son?" Marcus asked, a growing sense of dread filling his stomach. The boy's lower lip trembled. "They're gone. The bad men came to our house." His voice dropped to a whisper. There was a lot of blood. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. He looked more closely at the stains on the boy's clothes, realizing with growing horror that they likely weren't grass stains at all. How long ago? He asked, keeping his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Last night, the boy said. I hid with the babies in the secret place Dad showed me. I waited until it was quiet. Then, I took them and ran. The boy's eyes welled up with tears, but he blinked them back fiercely. Could you save my twin little sisters? He pleaded, his small voice cracking with emotion. Please, mister. I don't know what to do. Marcus knelt there in shock, the infant girl warm against his chest, her tiny hand having escaped the blanket to curl around his weathered finger. The contrast was stark. Her perfect, innocent hand against his calloused skin, skin that had known violence and hardship. The world seemed to stop around them in the parking lot of that forgotten diner, as Marcus Kane, feared by many, trusted by few, found himself facing the most unexpected crossroads of his life. Marcus stared at the boy, trying to process what he'd just heard. The weight of the baby girl in his arms suddenly felt heavier. He glanced around the empty parking lot, half expecting to see someone watching them. Kid, what's your name? Marcus asked, keeping his voice gentle. Tommy, the boy said, shifting his sister to his other arm. I'm 6. Tommy, Marcus repeated. And these little ones? Lily and Lucy, Tommy answered, looking down at the babies. They're only 3 months old. Mom said they're identical. That means they look the same. Marcus nodded, impressed by the boy's responsibility despite his situation. Tommy, I need you to tell me what happened. The whole story. Tommy's eyes darted around nervously. Can we go somewhere safe first? Dad said they might come back. The hair on the back of Marcus's neck stood up. He scanned the area again with new alertness. Yeah, good idea. Come on. He guided Tommy to the side of the diner, where a small playground sat empty. They settled on a bench with a clear view of the parking lot and rode beyond. Okay, Tommy. Tell me what happened, Marcus said, still cradling Lily, or was it Lucy, in his arms. Tommy took a deep breath. Dad worked with numbers. He said some bad men wanted him to help them with their money. The boy's voice trembled. Last week, these men in black suits came to our house. Dad was scared. He told Mom they were mafia. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Go on. Dad said he wouldn't help them do bad things. He told me mafia people hurt others and take their money. Tommy's eyes welled with tears. Last night, they came back. Dad saw them from the window and told me to take the babies to the hiding spot under the stairs. A tear slid down Tommy's dirt-streaked face. I heard Mom screaming, then loud noises, like when Dad dropped something heavy. His voice dropped to a whisper. But it wasn't something heavy. Gunshots, Marcus realized. The kid had heard his parents being executed. I stayed quiet like Dad taught me. The babies started crying, but I put my hand over their mouths. Tommy looked down, ashamed. Not hard. Just enough to make them quiet. I was scared the bad men would hear. You did good, Tommy, Marcus assured him. You protected your sisters. Tommy nodded, his small shoulders slumped with the weight of his actions. When it got really quiet, I peeked out. The bad men were gone. But Mom and Dad... His voice broke. There was so much red. They wouldn't wake up. Marcus felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. He'd seen death before, caused it even, but the thought of this boy witnessing his parents' murder made something inside him crack. I packed diapers in my backpack, Tommy continued, gesturing to the small Spider-Man bag hanging from one shoulder. And some bottles. But I didn't know how to make their milk. Mom always did that part. That was smart thinking, Marcus said. How did you find me? I walked all night, Tommy explained. The babies cried a lot. I saw your motorcycle and... He looked up at Marcus with those determined eyes. You look strong. And Dad said if anything bad happens, find someone who looks like they can help. Someone... Tommy hesitated. Someone who isn't afraid of bad people. Marcus understood. To a frightened child, his intimidating appearance had seemed like safety, not danger. Do you know who the men were? Marcus asked. Did you hear any names? Tommy's face scrunched in concentration. One was called Frankie, the boss one. Dad called him Mr. Vasco. Marcus inhaled sharply. The Vasco family controlled much of the illegal activity along the eastern seaboard. If they were after Tommy and his sisters, this was serious. Tommy, we need to get you and your sisters somewhere safe, Marcus said decisively. These men, they're dangerous. And if they think you saw them... The boy nodded solemnly. I did see them. They had guns with the long part on the end. The quiet kind. Silencers. The kid had witnessed a professional hit. Marcus made a decision. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The babies were starting to fuss again, probably hungry. They needed formula, diapers, proper shelter, and protection. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Yeah? Bear, it's Marcus. I need help. Big help. Marcus looked at Tommy, who was watching him with those trusting eyes. Call everyone. I mean everyone. The first rumble of motorcycles reached them 20 minutes after Marcus's call. Tommy's head jerked up, his eyes wide with fear. It's okay, Marcus reassured him, shifting the sleeping baby in his arms. These are my friends. They're coming to help. 3 bikes pulled into the diner parking lot, their engines cutting off in near unison. The riders dismounted, leather vests bearing the same patches as Marcus's. They approached with measured steps, taking in the unusual sight of their hardened brother holding an infant. Bear arrived first, a mountain of a man with a graying beard that reached his chest. His eyes softened when they landed on Tommy. This is Tommy, Marcus said simply, and his sisters, Lily and Lucy. Bear knelt down, putting himself at eye level with the boy. Hey there, buddy. I'm Bear. His voice, usually a thunderous rumble, had gentled to something almost kind. Tommy pressed closer to Marcus, but managed a small nod. Mafia hit, Marcus explained in a low voice. Parents. Kids saw everything. Bear's expression darkened. Vasco family, Marcus added, and Bear cursed under his breath before catching himself with a glance at Tommy. Sorry, little man, he said. We're going to keep you safe, okay? More bikes arrived. 2, then 5, then a dozen. Each rider approached Marcus for instructions, their usual swagger replaced by something more purposeful. Word spread quickly through their ranks about the children's situation. We need supplies, Marcus told Dog, a lanky rider with a talent for logistics. Formula, diapers, clean clothes for all 3, and food for the boy. Dog nodded, immediately dispatching 2 younger members to the nearest store. Hawk, their security specialist, established a perimeter around the diner. We need to move them soon, he advised. 2 exposed here. Working on it, Marcus replied. He watched as Tommy cautiously accepted a chocolate milk from the diner waitress, who'd come outside to investigate the growing gathering of bikers. The babies were starting to fuss again. Lucy, Marcus had learned to distinguish them by a tiny birthmark on Lucy's wrist, began to cry in earnest. They're hungry, Tommy explained anxiously, and they need clean diapers. A rider named Mercy approached, her leather vest adorned with the same patches as the men. Let me, she offered, holding out her arms. I've got nieces. Marcus hesitated, surprising himself with his reluctance to hand over the baby. Finally, he passed Lucy to her, watching carefully as Mercy cradled the infant. You're a natural, Kane, Bear commented with a hint of amusement. Shut up, Marcus growled, but there was no real heat behind it. More motorcycles poured into the lot. Riders Marcus hadn't seen in months arrived, having dropped everything at the urgent call. The small parking area filled, then overflowed to the street beyond. The diner owner emerged, looking nervous until Bear slipped him some cash, and explained they'd be gone soon. Dog returned with supplies. Formula's warming inside, he reported. Got clothes, diapers, and some toys. Tommy watched the activity with wide eyes. "Are they all your friends?" he asked Marcus in a hushed voice. "They're my brothers," Marcus corrected. "And sisters," he added, nodding toward Mercy and 3 other women in club colors who were preparing bottles. "Why are they helping us?" Tommy asked, accepting a sandwich someone had brought him. Marcus considered the question. "Because I asked," he said finally. "And because we protect our own." "But we're not yours," Tommy pointed out with a child's directness. Marcus met the boy's eyes. "You are now." By noon, nearly 100 riders had gathered. The once quiet diner now sat at the center of a sea of motorcycles. What had begun as a handful of bikers had transformed into something resembling an army. Rough men and women with tattoos and weathered faces, all united in unexpected purpose. Hawk approached with a map. "Safe house is ready, about 60 miles north. Remote, defensible." Marcus nodded, surveying the assembled riders. They waited for his word. An unusual quiet, settling over the normally rowdy group. Tommy stood beside him, looking small, yet somehow stronger than before. "We move in formation," Marcus announced. "Kids in the middle, advanced scouts, rear guard. Anyone spots trouble, we regroup, not engage. Clear?" Nods circled through the crowd. "These children are under our protection now," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "All of ours." The roar of 100 motorcycles filled the air as the convoy formed along the highway. Marcus rode at the front, his bike modified with a makeshift carrier securely attached to the side. Tommy sat there, strapped in safely, his small hands gripping the edge. The twins were nestled in a specially constructed compartment between Bear and Mercy in a 3-wheeled bike that offered more stability. "You okay?" Marcus asked, glancing down at Tommy. The boy nodded, his face a mixture of fear and wonder as he looked back at the impressive line of motorcycles stretching behind them. "Just hold on tight. We'll be there before dark," Marcus promised. He raised his arm and circled it once in the air, the signal to move out. The formation came to life, engines rumbling in a synchronized growl that vibrated through the pavement. They pulled onto the highway in practiced sequence. Front riders, middle section with the children, rear guard sweeping up behind. The spring air rushed past them as they rode, warm but not hot, carrying the scent of distant fields. Tommy's hair whipped in the wind, his eyes wide as they traveled. Occasionally he would point at something. A hawk circling overhead, a field of bright yellow flowers, and Marcus would nod in acknowledgement. "Never been on a motorcycle before?" Marcus asked during a brief slowdown. "Never," Tommy replied, the hint of a smile touching his lips for the first time. Every 20 miles, riders from the front would drop back, and others would move forward, rotating positions to prevent fatigue. At the halfway point, they pulled into an abandoned gas station to check on the babies and let Tommy stretch his legs. Bear approached, his massive frame blocking the sun. "The little ladies are sleeping like angels," he reported. "Mercy gave them bottles right before we left." Tommy walked around in small circles, working the stiffness from his legs. A rider named Dex produced a small package of cookies from his saddlebag and offered them to the boy. Tommy accepted them with a quiet, "Thank you," his manners intact despite everything. "You've got a brave kid there," Hawk said, coming to stand beside Marcus. "Hasn't cried once." Marcus watched Tommy carefully. "That's what worries me. Kid his age should be falling apart." "Shock, probably," Hawk suggested. "It'll hit him later." After the brief rest, they mounted up again. The formation tightened as they turned off the main highway onto progressively smaller roads. The scenery changed from open fields to rolling hills, then to thicker woods. The path narrowed until they were traveling on a gravel road that wound through dense forest. 2 riders scouted ahead at each turn, radioing back with all clear signals. Another pair hung back far enough to spot any vehicles that might be following them. The middle section, carrying the children, maintained steady speed, surrounded by a protective wall of motorcycles. Tommy had grown quiet, his earlier curiosity giving way to exhaustion. He leaned slightly against Marcus's back, not quite asleep, but drifting. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees in dappled patterns across the road ahead. "Almost there," Marcus told him as they made a final turn onto what appeared to be a logging trail. The path eventually opened to reveal a large clearing. At its center stood a two-story cabin with a wraparound porch. The structure looked rustic but solid, its windows reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. A detached garage stood to one side, large enough to hide their vehicles from aerial view. "Home, sweet home," Bear announced, as the first wave of riders circled the property, establishing a perimeter. Mercy pulled up beside them with the twins, both babies now awake and fussing. "They know it's dinner time," she said with a tired smile. Tommy climbed carefully from the carrier, his legs wobbling slightly after the long ride. He looked up at the cabin, then at the circle of bikers now parking their motorcycles in an organized pattern around the property. "Is this where we'll stay?" he asked Marcus. "For now," Marcus answered, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's safe here." The sun dipped lower behind the trees as riders moved with purpose around the property. Some carried supplies inside, others established lookout positions. Hawk organized a security rotation, while Dog inventoried the food and baby supplies they'd brought. As twilight settled over the clearing, Marcus stood on the porch, watching as the first stars appeared. Behind him, through the cabin's windows, came the unlikely sounds of leather-clad bikers cooing at babies and a little boy's voice asking questions about his new temporary home. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned, but not the kind Marcus was used to. This wasn't the organized violence of a bar fight or the controlled danger of a highway run. This was pure, bewildered panic as grown men faced down two screaming infants. "They won't stop crying," Dog said, holding one of the twins awkwardly against his shoulder. His tattooed arms looked massive, wrapped around the tiny bundle in pink. "I'm bouncing and everything." Bear had the other baby cradled in the crook of his arm, his face a mask of concentration. "Maybe they're hungry or need changing." Mercy, the only female rider who joined them, pushed her way through the circle of helpless bikers. "Give her here before you drop her," she said, taking the baby from Dog's grateful arms. "And someone needs to warm up formula." Tommy sat on a worn couch in the corner, watching the adults with wide eyes. His small body seemed to sink into the cushions, making him look even tinier than he was. The long ride and everything before it had clearly taken its toll. His eyelids drooped, but he fought to stay awake, vigilant despite his exhaustion. Marcus crossed the room and sat beside him. "You should get some rest, kid." Tommy shook his head. "I need to watch my sisters." "We've got them," Marcus said, his voice gentler than he'd intended. "Nobody's getting past us." The boy looked up at him, studying his face as if searching for the truth. "Promise?" Something tightened in Marcus's chest. "Yeah, I promise." Across the room, Hawk had found some canned soup in the cupboard and was heating it on the old stove. The twins had finally quieted down after Mercy, and Bear had managed to feed and change them. "You hungry?" Marcus asked Tommy. The boy nodded reluctantly. "Hey, Hawk," Marcus called. "Got enough of that for the kid?" "Coming right up, boss," Hawk answered, ladling soup into a chipped bowl. The cabin was basic, but solid. 3 bedrooms upstairs, a main room with a kitchen downstairs, and a bathroom that had seen better days. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, and riders had already checked for any security weaknesses. Outside, others patrolled the perimeter, their cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the gathering darkness. Tommy ate slowly, his movements mechanical. When he finished, his eyes could barely stay open. "Come on," Marcus said. "Let's find you a bed." He led the boy upstairs to the smallest bedroom, where someone had already put fresh sheets on the twin bed. Tommy crawled under the covers without protest, but when Marcus turned to leave, a small hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Will you stay?" Tommy whispered. "Just until I fall asleep." Marcus hesitated, then lowered himself onto the edge of the bed. "Sure, kid." He sat there awkwardly as Tommy's breathing gradually slowed and deepened. The boy's fingers remained loosely curled around Marcus's wrist, as if afraid he might disappear. Marcus waited until he was certain the child was asleep before gently extricating himself. When he returned downstairs, the scene had transformed. The main room was dimly lit now, with just a few lamps casting a warm glow. Bear sat in a rocking chair that looked comically small beneath his bulk, one of the twins asleep against his chest. His massive hand patted her back with surprising gentleness. Mercy had the other baby swaddled tightly, walking slow circles around the room and humming something low and sweet. Dog and Hawk had cleared the kitchen table and spread out maps of the area, marking escape routes and defensive positions. "Kid asleep?" Hawk asked, looking up from the maps. Marcus nodded. "Out like a light." "Poor little guy," Mercy said. "Can't imagine what he's been through." Marcus moved to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to peer outside. The night was quiet, the forest around them a black wall. Stars punctured the darkness overhead. "We've got 24-hour watch set up," Dog informed him. 8 men on rotation. Rest can sleep in shifts. Marcus let the curtain fall back into place. "Good." He turned and leaned against the wall, watching his crew. These were men who'd brawled in bars across 3 states, who carried the scars of knife fights and worse. Men who lived by a code that kept them on society's edges. Yet here they were, feeding babies, warming formula, making soup for a 6-year-old boy. Something shifted in Marcus's chest, a loosening of a knot he hadn't realized was there. The weight he always carried felt different somehow. Still heavy, but less crushing. Bear looked up from the sleeping baby and caught Marcus watching him, instead of the embarrassment Marcus expected. Bear simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The cabin settled into uneasy quiet around midnight. Most of the bikers slept in shifts. Some sprawled across the living room floor, others in the remaining bedrooms, while a vigilant few patrolled outside. The twins had finally fallen into deep sleep after hours of fussing, nestled in makeshift cribs fashioned from dresser drawers lined with blankets. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his large frame hunched over a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. Sleep wouldn't come, not with the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He'd made decisions that affected the lives of his brothers before, but never children. Never innocence. The burner phone in his pocket vibrated. Marcus glanced around the dimly lit room before stepping onto the back porch, careful not to wake anyone. The night air bit at his skin as he answered. "Yeah?" "It's Viper." The voice on the other end belonged to one of his most trusted contacts, a man who straddled both sides of the law and had ears in places Marcus couldn't reach. "Talk to me," Marcus said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "You've stepped in something deep, brother." Viper's voice was tight. "Word on the street is the Castellano family is looking for witnesses from the Wilson job." Marcus's jaw clenched. "The Wilson job?" "Couple that got hit 3 days ago. Refused to let their shipping business be used for moving product. Made an example of them." The pieces clicked into place. "The kids," Marcus muttered. "Yeah. Seems they didn't know there were children in the house. Now they're scrambling to clean up loose ends. They've got guys asking questions all over the county, showing pictures of the kids." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "How'd they get pictures?" "Security cameras from a neighbor's house caught the boy and the babies being taken away from the scene by someone. Couldn't make out who, but they've got clear images of the kids." Marcus leaned against the porch railing, his mind racing. "How widespread is the search?" They've got crews working through every town within 100 miles, offering serious cash for information. It's only a matter of time before someone talks. Keep me posted on any movement, Marcus said. And Viper, be careful who you talk to about this. Always am. Watch your back. The line went dead, and Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. The peaceful night now seemed threatening, the shadows deeper, the silence loaded with danger. He stared out at the trees surrounding the cabin, wondering if eyes were already watching them. The door creaked behind him. Dog stepped onto the porch, his face grim in the moonlight. "Trouble?" he asked, reading Marcus's expression. "Mafia's looking for the kids." Marcus kept his voice low. "The Castellanos." Dog swore quietly. "How close are they?" "Too close. They've got pictures and men in every town nearby." They stood in silence for a moment, both men calculating risks, weighing options. "We can't just keep running," Dog finally said. "Even with all our brothers, we can't hide forever." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know." "So, what's the play here, brother?" Dog asked. "These kids, they're innocent. But taking on the Castellanos, that's suicide." Marcus turned to look through the window at the cabin's interior. In the dim light, he could make out the small forms of the twins sleeping peacefully. Upstairs, Tommy was curled up in bed, finally getting the rest he desperately needed. These children had lost everything in an instant of violence they didn't deserve. Something stirred in Marcus's memory, an image of another child from long ago, a girl with his eyes and his mother's smile. His sister, before the world took her too. "We're not running," Marcus said, his decision crystallizing with each word. "And we're not just hiding." Dog raised an eyebrow. "What then? The Castellanos want to find these kids?" Marcus's voice hardened. "Let's make sure they find something else instead." "You talking about taking the fight to them?" Dog sounded surprised, but not opposed. Marcus nodded. "They're hunting witnesses, but they don't know what the boy saw, what he heard. They're working blind, which means we have an advantage." He turned fully to face his friend, his mind already forming a plan. "We're going to gather intelligence, find out who exactly was involved in killing those parents. Then we're going to make sure they pay, legally." "Legally?" Now Dog looked genuinely shocked. "We get evidence. Build a case that not even their bought judges can ignore. Make it too public, too messy for them to bury." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "And all the while, we keep these kids safe." Dog studied him for a long moment. "This isn't our usual way." "Nothing about this is usual," Marcus replied. "But I made a promise to that boy, and I'm going to keep it." Dawn pushed gentle fingers of light through the cabin windows. Marcus sat in a worn armchair, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. He'd spent the night moving between watching the twins, checking the perimeter, and forming a plan in his mind. The coffee mug in his hand had been refilled so many times he'd lost count. Across the room, one of the babies stirred. Marcus rose quickly, setting down his mug on a side table. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, reaching the makeshift crib before the infant's whimpers could wake her sister. It was Lily. He'd learned to tell them apart by the tiny birthmark on her right wrist. "Shh," he whispered, awkwardly lifting the tiny bundle. Her body felt impossibly small in his rough hands. "Let's let everyone sleep a little longer." He cradled her against his chest, patting her back the way he'd seen Tommy do. The motion felt foreign, but Lily settled against him, her tiny fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. Marcus carried her to the kitchen, away from the sleeping bikers scattered across the living room floor. Dog was already there, making a fresh pot of coffee. He raised an eyebrow at the sight of Marcus holding the baby. "Never thought I'd see the day," Dog murmured with a hint of amusement. Marcus grunted in response. Formula's in that bag, he said, nodding toward the supplies they'd gathered yesterday. Dog moved to prepare a bottle, working with surprising efficiency. You look like hell. Get any sleep? No. Marcus shifted Lily to his other arm. Been thinking about our next move. And? We need information. Marcus kept his voice low. About the Castellanos. About the hit on the Wilson family. About everything. Dog handed him the prepared bottle. Marcus tested it on his wrist, the way Tommy had shown him, then offered it to Lily. She accepted it eagerly. I've got some contacts in Chicago, Dog said. Could make some calls. See what they know about the Castellano operation. Marcus nodded. Do it. But be careful. We need to know who ordered the hit, who carried it out, and why they wanted the Wilsons dead so badly. And then what? Dog asked, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Then we build a case. Get evidence. Names, dates, places. Marcus looked down at Lily, who gazed up at him with complete trust as she drank. These kids deserve justice, not just protection. Dog sipped his coffee thoughtfully. That's not our usual style. Nothing about this is usual, Marcus replied. Footsteps padded softly down the stairs. Tommy appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, his small face puffy, but more rested than yesterday. Good morning, he said, his voice small in the quiet kitchen. Morning, kid, Marcus said. You hungry? Tommy nodded, climbing onto one of the kitchen chairs. Dog placed a bowl of cereal in front of him, and the boy began to eat, his movements mechanical. Tommy, Marcus said gently, I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Is that okay? The boy stiffened, but nodded again. The men who came to your house. Did you see them? Tommy's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Some of them. I was hiding in the closet with Rose and Lily. Marcus exchanged glances with Dog. You were hiding in the closet? Mom told me to, Tommy explained, when she heard the cars coming. She said to take the babies and stay quiet, no matter what. That was brave of you, Marcus said, feeling a surge of respect for this small boy who'd protected his sisters through unimaginable horror. Do you remember what any of the men looked like? Tommy's eyes grew distant. There was a tall one with a scar on his cheek. Like this. He traced a line from the corner of his right eye down to his jaw. Marcus and Dog exchanged another look. That was specific and useful. Anyone else? Marcus asked. The boss man had a gold ring with a red stone. He kept pointing at Dad with it. Tommy's voice trembled slightly. And there was another one who talked funny, not like us. An accent? Dog asked. Tommy nodded. And I remember the numbers on their car. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. The license plate? You remember that? Mom always made me memorize important things, Tommy said simply. She said I have a good memory. The car was black, and the numbers were JXL493. Dog was already writing it down on a napkin. Tommy, Marcus said, his voice gentler than Dog had ever heard it. What else do you remember? Anything they said? Names they used? Tommy put down his spoon and looked at Marcus with serious eyes that seemed too old for his face. They called the boss man Vince. The one with the scar was Russo. Tommy's voice was barely above a whisper. They kept talking about a shipment that Dad wouldn't move. They said he broke their trust. Marcus nodded, keeping his face calm despite the excitement building inside him. These were real names, leads they could follow. What else did they say, Tommy? Take your time. The boy closed his eyes, his forehead wrinkling with concentration. They said Dad was stupid for not taking the money, that nobody says no to the family. He opened his eyes again. Dad kept saying he wasn't going to smuggle bad medicine that hurt people. Bad medicine, Dog repeated, writing furiously on the napkin. That's what Dad called it. He said it was killing kids. Tommy's voice trembled. Then the boss man got really mad. Marcus gently handed Lily to Dog and knelt beside Tommy's chair. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder, careful to keep his touch light. "You're doing great, Tommy. This helps us more than you know." He paused, seeing the pain in the child's eyes. "We don't have to talk about the worst parts, okay? But was there anything else you saw or heard? Anything at all?" Tommy nodded slowly. "The scar man, Russo, has a snake tattoo on his hand." He pointed to the back of his own small hand. "It goes all the way up his arm. I saw it when—" He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. "That's good. Real good," Marcus said. "A snake tattoo is something we can look for. And the funny-talking man had a broken tooth right here." Tommy pointed to his front teeth. "I could see it when he smiled. He smiled a lot, even when—" Again, he couldn't finish. The kitchen fell silent, except for Lily's soft, suckling noises as Dog fed her. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest, but kept it from his face. "One more thing," Tommy said suddenly. "They said something about Castellano being happy and cleaning up loose ends." Dog nearly dropped the bottle. "Castellano? You're sure they said that name?" Tommy nodded. "Is that important?" Marcus and Dog exchanged significant looks. The Castellano family was one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the Midwest. If they were involved, this was even more serious than they'd thought. "Yeah, it's important," Marcus said. "You've got an amazing memory, Tommy." The boy shrugged. "Mom said it was a gift. She was teaching me to remember phone numbers and addresses too, in case I ever got lost." Marcus felt a pang of admiration for the mother he'd never met. She'd done everything she could to prepare her son for trouble. "The car," Marcus said. "You mentioned the license plate. Did you see any other cars?" Tommy nodded. "There was a blue van. It didn't have a front license plate, but I saw the back one when they were leaving. WRX 771. Dog whistled softly. "2 plates. That's gold, kid." "And there was a sticker on the van window," Tommy added. "A wolf head with teeth." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. The boy had captured details that hardened police detectives might miss. Every piece of information was another link in the chain they could use to bring down the people who had murdered his parents. "Tommy," Marcus said, his voice suddenly urgent. "Did they say anything about coming back for you? And your sisters? About looking for witnesses?" The boy's face paled. "They said there couldn't be any loose ends. The boss man asked if the job was clean. And the scar man said—" He swallowed hard. "He said they needed to find the kids to make sure." Marcus stood up, his mind racing. In Tommy's memory was everything they needed. Faces, names, license plates, distinct physical features. The boy was a walking case file against the killers. "Dog," Marcus said quietly, "get everyone up. We need to move faster than I thought." Dog nodded and left with Lily to wake the others. Marcus looked back at Tommy, seeing the boy with new eyes. This wasn't just a child who needed protection. He was the key to bringing down the people who had destroyed his family. "Tommy," Marcus said gently, "you just became the most important person in this whole operation. Those things you remembered, they're going to help us make sure the bad men never hurt anyone again." Later that afternoon, Marcus took Tommy outside to the back of the safe house. The yard was surrounded by tall trees that blocked the view from the road. The afternoon sun warmed the grass beneath their feet. "We need to stretch our legs a bit," Marcus said, watching Tommy's cautious steps. The boy had barely left his sister's side all day. "Are they going to be okay?" Tommy asked, glancing back at the house. "Dog and Whiskey are watching them like hawks. Nobody better at it," Marcus assured him. "Those two raised kids of their own." Tommy nodded, but didn't look convinced. Marcus understood. The boy had lost too much to trust easily. "Come here. I want to show you something," Marcus said, leading Tommy to a fallen log at the edge of the clearing. They sat down, and Marcus pulled out a small pocket knife. "This was my first knife. My dad gave it to me when I was about your age." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really?" You were allowed to have a knife? Different times, Marcus said with a half smile. But what my dad taught me wasn't just about the knife. It was about being ready. He turned the closed knife in his palm. Being ready isn't about being scared all the time. It's about knowing what to do when things get tough. Tommy looked down at his sneakers. I wasn't ready when they came. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. Nobody could be ready for what happened to you, Tommy. Not even me. But you're not afraid of anything, Tommy said, looking up at Marcus with admiration that made the older man uncomfortable. Marcus shook his head. Everyone's afraid of something. The trick isn't not being scared. It's knowing what to do, even when you are scared. He stood up and motioned for Tommy to follow him. Let me show you something that might help you feel a little safer. Marcus walked Tommy to the center of the clearing and knelt down so they were eye to eye. If someone grabs you here, Marcus said, gently taking Tommy's wrist. What do you think you should do? Tommy tried to pull away. I don't know. Pull. Run. Good instincts, Marcus nodded. But there's a better way. He repositioned Tommy's arm. Turn your arm this way and push down through the weak part of their grip, right here at the thumb. Tommy tried it, and his small arm slipped free. Good. Now, if you can't get away, you make noise. Lots of noise. Yell for help? Tommy asked. Absolutely. And if nobody's around to help, you still yell. Make them think twice. Marcus demonstrated a loud, commanding no that echoed through the trees. Tommy's attempt was quieter, but determined. That's it, Marcus encouraged. Now louder. Like you really mean it. No! Tommy shouted, his voice stronger. Perfect, Marcus said, smiling. Now, the most important thing is to run. Always run toward people if you can. They practiced a few more simple moves. How to stomp on an adult's foot, how to make yourself heard, and most importantly, how to get away. Tommy was a quick learner, his face serious as he absorbed every instruction. After about 20 minutes, Marcus could see Tommy getting tired. They sat back down on the log. You did great, Marcus said. But remember, the best thing is to stay with me or one of the guys. We're not going to let anyone get close to you or your sisters. Tommy was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. My dad taught me how to ride a bike. He said I was brave when I fell and got back up. Marcus felt the weight of those words. This boy had lost everything, but was still standing. Your dad was right. You are brave, Tommy. Braver than most men I know. Tommy looked up at Marcus with clear eyes. Would you teach me more tomorrow? Every day until you don't need it anymore, Marcus promised. As they walked back to the house, Tommy slipped his small hand into Marcus's rough, calloused one. The simple gesture caught Marcus off guard. He looked down at their joined hands, then at Tommy's trusting face. You'll keep us safe, right? Tommy asked. Marcus squeezed the boy's hand gently. With everything I've got. When they reached the porch, Tommy didn't immediately let go. Instead, he leaned slightly against Marcus's side, a silent declaration of trust that meant more than any words could have. The safe-house kitchen hummed with tension as night fell. Marcus stood at the head of the wooden table, his weathered hands spread flat on its surface. The overhead light cast deep shadows across his face. Around him, 12 of his most trusted riders waited in silence. The rest kept watch outside, patrolling the perimeter or resting in shifts. You all know why we're here, Marcus began, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. We've got 3 kids who lost everything because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dog, a burly man with a gray-streaked beard, nodded. Poor little things. The twins finally stopped crying. Whiskey's watching them, and the boy now. Marcus straightened up and crossed his arms over his chest. What we're facing isn't just some street thugs. These are organized, dangerous men who won't stop looking. Then we stop them first, Ace said, slapping his fist into his palm. Several others murmured in agreement. Marcus shook his head slowly. Not like that. Not this time. The room went quiet. Confused glances passed between the men. "Since when do we back down from a fight?" Ace asked, his voice sharp with challenge. "I'm not talking about backing down," Marcus said firmly. "I'm talking about doing this right." He took a deep breath. The boy, Tommy, has information. He saw things, names, faces, details about the men who killed his parents. "So we hunt them down," another writer named Snake said. "Simple enough." "And then what?" Marcus asked. "We take them out, and the rest of their organization comes looking harder? We start a war that puts those kids in even more danger?" He shook his head again. "No, we're not going for revenge here. We're going for justice." The word hung in the air, unfamiliar to many in the room. Mac, the oldest writer present, leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, Marcus?" "We gather evidence. We use Tommy's memories. We track movements. We document everything. Then we find a way to get it all to the right authorities." A chorus of disbelieving laughter rippled through the room. "Since when do we work with cops?" Snake spat. Marcus's eyes hardened. "Since 3 innocent kids' lives depended on it. This isn't about us. It isn't about our code or our pride." Dog stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Marcus is right. This is different." He looked around the table. "We all saw those babies. We all heard that boy's story." The room fell silent again, each man lost in thought. "I need to know who's with me," Marcus said after a moment. "This won't be quick, and it won't be easy. We'll need to be smarter than we've ever been." Mac was the first to respond. "My grandson is about Tommy's age. If anything happened to him—" He didn't finish the sentence. "I'm in, whatever it takes." "Those little girls remind me of my nieces," another writer admitted. "I'm in too." One by one, the men voiced their commitment. Even Snake and Ace eventually nodded their agreement, though reluctance showed on their faces. "We'll need resources," Marcus continued once everyone had spoken. "Safe locations, supplies, surveillance equipment. Mac, you still have those contacts in electronics?" "I can get what we need," Mac confirmed. "Dog, you and Whiskey are the best with the kids. You stay close to them." Dog nodded. "They're starting to trust us, the boy especially." Marcus turned to Ace. "I need your network of informants. Find out everything you can about who's looking for these kids and where they're operating from." "Consider it done," Ace said, his earlier resistance fading as the mission took shape. For nearly an hour they planned, assigned roles, and established communication protocols. As the meeting wound down, Marcus looked at each man in turn. "This is about protection and justice, not vengeance," he reminded them. "We do this right, and those kids get a chance at a normal life. We do this wrong, and we're no better than the men who orphaned them." The writers nodded, a new sense of purpose evident in their postures and expressions. "For the kids," Dog said, raising his coffee mug in a solemn toast. 12 mugs rose in response. "For the kids," they echoed. The morning sun struggled through the dense cloud cover as Marcus eased a nondescript gray sedan into a parking spot 3 blocks from their target. He'd traded his leather jacket for a simple navy windbreaker, looking almost unrecognizable without his cuts and patches. Beside him, Ace adjusted a baseball cap over his usually uncovered head. "Remember, we're just passing through." "Eyes open, mouth shut," Marcus said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Dog, who sat in the back seat with a small notebook. "Got it," Dog confirmed, reviewing the hastily scribbled notes from their conversation with Tommy earlier that morning. The boy had been surprisingly clear-headed at breakfast. Between bites of scrambled eggs, he'd described a building with the Big Fish sign, where he'd once seen the men who hurt his parents. He recalled a green door at the back and the smell of fish that made his nose wrinkle. Most importantly, he remembered hearing a name: Castellano. "Kid's got some memory," Ace said, tucking a small camera into his jacket pocket. Marcus nodded. His dad taught him to play memory games, said it kept him sharp. A hint of admiration colored his voice. They exited the car casually, moving like ordinary men running everyday errands. Marcus led them down the main street of the small harbor town, their eyes scanning storefronts and alleyways. The late October air carried a biting chill off the water. "There," Dog said quietly after they'd walked 2 blocks. He nodded toward a weathered building with a faded blue marlin painted above the entrance. "Castellanos Seafood Market." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Looks quiet enough. Let's walk past, then circle around to check the back." The front of the seafood market appeared legitimate. Through the large windows, they could see customers selecting fish from ice-packed displays. A teenage boy in a rubber apron wrapped purchases in paper. Nothing seemed out of place. "Keep walking," Marcus muttered as they passed. "Don't stare." They continued to the corner, then turned down a side street that would take them behind the row of buildings. The narrow alley behind the shops was lined with dumpsters and delivery doors. Marcus counted doorways until they reached the back of Castellanos. Just as Tommy had described, a green metal door marked the rear entrance. 2 empty crates stood beside it, and a security camera was mounted above the frame. "Camera," Ace whispered, pretending to check his phone. Marcus nodded slightly. "Let's keep moving. Circle the block once more." As they strolled past neighboring businesses, Dog pointed out 2 more cameras strategically positioned along the alley. "That's a lot of security for a fish market," he noted. During their second pass of the main street, Marcus noticed a black SUV with tinted windows pull up in front of Castellanos. 2 men in dark suits stepped out and entered the shop. They didn't come out with any packages. "Those aren't fish customers," Ace observed. They found a small cafe across the street that offered a view of the market's entrance. Over coffee, they watched the comings and goings for nearly an hour. Twice more, men in suits entered without buying anything visible. "We need to see that back door again," Marcus decided finally, leaving cash for their drinks. This time, they approached from the opposite end of the alley. A delivery truck now blocked most of the view of the green door. As they walked closer, the door swung open. A man emerged, speaking rapidly in Italian on his phone. Behind him, before the door closed, Marcus caught a glimpse of 2 armed men standing inside. The 3 bikers kept walking, not breaking stride. "Armed guards," Marcus said under his breath once they were well past. "Definitely not just selling flounder in there," Dog agreed. They completed their circuit and returned to the car. Once inside, Marcus pulled out his own phone and quickly took notes. "Tommy was right," he said grimly. "But this looks bigger than a few thugs. That's a full operation." Ace leaned back in his seat, whistling softly. "Did you see the hardware on those guys inside? Military grade." "And those suits coming and going?" Dog added. "Something's happening in there beyond the backroom muscle." Marcus started the car, but didn't immediately pull away. "We need more intel. This isn't just some small-time crew looking to tie up loose ends. This is organized, professional. If they're this established," Ace said, "they'll have reach, connections, maybe even cops on the payroll." The weight of this realization settled over them. What had seemed like a straightforward mission to identify and neutralize a threat had suddenly become much more complex. "We need to rethink our approach," Marcus said, finally putting the car in gear. "But at least, now, we know where to start." The safe house quieted as night fell. Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table, the only light coming from a small lamp that cast long shadows across the room. Spread before him were papers, folders, and his laptop. The twins had finally settled after their evening feeding, and Tommy was asleep in the small bedroom down the hall. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. After their reconnaissance at Castellanos, he'd put the word out through trusted channels for any information on the murdered parents. Now, documents and records trickled in from various sources, some legal, others decidedly not. "You still at it?" Ace whispered, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. Marcus nodded, accepting the coffee gratefully. Something about this doesn't add up. Why target a normal family so brutally? Tommy's parents weren't players. Dad was an accountant. Mom worked part-time at a bookstore. Maybe they saw something they shouldn't have, Ace suggested, settling into the chair across from him. Maybe. Marcus picked up a driver's license copy. The father, David Parker, looked ordinary enough. Kind eyes, slight smile. Not the face of someone mixed up with the mob. Marcus shuffled through employment records, bank statements, and medical files that one of their contacts in hospital administration had forwarded. The Parkers were exactly what they appeared to be. A normal family who'd recently welcomed twin girls. No unusual deposits, no suspicious trips abroad, no criminal records. "I'm missing something," Marcus muttered. He opened his laptop and continued searching. A newspaper article from 3 years ago showed David accepting a community service award. Another mentioned Elena Parker organizing a book drive for children's hospitals. Then, he found a photo that made him pause. It was from a local newspaper, dated 5 years earlier. "Local Heroes Save Teen in River Accident," read the headline. The image showed a younger David and Elena Parker standing with emergency responders near a riverbank. Marcus zoomed in on the image, feeling a strange prickle of recognition. The article described how the couple had been hiking when they spotted a teenage girl who had fallen into the river and was being swept away. David had jumped in while Elena called for help. "What is it?" Ace asked, noticing Marcus's sudden intensity. "Not sure yet," he replied, reading further. The teenager wasn't named in the article for privacy reasons, but something about the timing, the location. Marcus quickly opened another folder, this one personal, stored on an encrypted part of his hard drive. He clicked through old documents until he found what he was looking for. A hospital discharge summary for his sister Lily. The date matched the newspaper article almost exactly. "Jesus," he whispered, the color draining from his face. Ace leaned forward. "What?" Marcus turned the laptop. "I think these people, Tommy's parents, saved my sister's life 5 years ago." The discharge summary was clear. Lily Kane, 17, treated for hypothermia and minor injuries after a river accident while hiking in Blue Ridge Park. She had been swept downstream nearly a quarter-mile before being rescued by civilian bystanders. "Are you sure it's the same incident?" Ace asked, comparing the dates. "The timing matches. The location matches." Marcus's voice was tight. "Lily was going through a rough patch back then. She'd run away for a few days. I was looking everywhere for her. Then, I got the call she was in the hospital." He stared at the newspaper photo again, trying to connect these strangers to his memory of that day. He'd been so focused on Lily, he barely remembered the hospital staff, let alone thanking whoever had saved her. "But why didn't you recognize them? Their names?" Ace asked. Marcus shook his head. "I never knew who pulled her out. By the time I got to the hospital, Lily was stabilized, and whoever helped her was gone. She just said a nice couple had helped her." He paused. "I was just grateful she was alive. I didn't press for details." He sat back in his chair, trying to process this revelation. The couple who had saved his sister's life were now dead. Their children, orphaned and hunted, had somehow found their way to him of all people. "This can't be coincidence," Ace said quietly. "No," Marcus agreed. "But I don't understand the connection to Castellano. Why would the mob target the Parkers years later? What's missing?" He looked through the papers again, searching for anything that might explain the link between the Parkers and the Mafia. Financial records showed nothing suspicious. Work history was consistent. There were no obvious connections to organized crime. "There's more to this story," Marcus said, frustration edging his voice. "Something I'm not seeing yet." He gathered the papers into a folder and closed his laptop. The connection to his past was clear, but the reason behind the Parkers' murder remained elusive. Tomorrow would require more digging, more questions. As he stood to stretch his cramped muscles, Marcus glanced toward the hallway where Tommy and the twins slept. The circle had somehow closed, bringing him face to face with a debt he never knew he owed. The morning light filtered through the dusty blinds of the safe house as Marcus hunched over the kitchen table. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but his mind wouldn't rest. The discovery from the night before that Tommy's parents might have saved his sister kept him turning pages and clicking through files. "You look like hell," said a gruff voice. Marcus glanced up to see Dutch standing in the doorway, a steaming mug in each hand. Dutch was one of the oldest members of their chapter, a burly man with a silver beard and weathered skin that told stories of decades on the road. Unlike many of the others, Dutch had skills beyond writing and fighting. He'd once worked in records at the county courthouse before a drunk driving conviction had cost him his job. "Brought you some coffee," Dutch said, setting one mug down. "Thought you could use some help with whatever's got you looking like you've seen a ghost." Marcus nodded gratefully. "I need to confirm something. A connection that seems impossible." Dutch pulled up a chair, the wooden legs scraping against the floor. "I'm good at connections. Used to map out property lines and family trees for the county." Marcus spread out the newspaper clippings and documents he'd gathered. "The Parkers. Tommy's parents. I think they're the same people who saved my sister Lily 5 years ago." Dutch whistled low. "That would be one hell of a coincidence." "Too big to be chance," Marcus replied. He pushed the newspaper article toward Dutch. "The dates match up with when Lily had her accident. But I need more. I need to be sure." Dutch studied the article, then nodded. "Let me make a call. I still know a few people who owe me favors." While Dutch stepped outside to use his phone, Marcus checked on the children. Tommy was in the living room with Ace, learning how to play poker with candy instead of chips. The twins were being fed by 2 younger riders, who had taken to the task with surprising gentleness. When Dutch returned 30 minutes later, his face told Marcus he'd found something. "Got a buddy pulling the full police report from that river rescue," Dutch said. "Should have it in my email any minute now." Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from one of their lookouts. All clear around the perimeter, no unusual movement. He breathed a little easier, but knew it wouldn't last. Dutch's laptop chimed. "Here we go," he said, opening the email attachment. Full incident report from Blue Ridge Park, May 17, 2018. Marcus leaned in as Dutch scrolled through the document. The report detailed how David and Elena Parker had been hiking when they heard cries for help. They found a teenage girl clinging to a rock in the river after apparently slipping from the trail above. David had entered the water while Elena called 911. "Victim identified as Lily Kane, age 17. Dutch read aloud. "That's your sister." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Keep reading." Dutch continued through the report. Girl was unconscious when pulled from water. Mr. Parker performed CPR until emergency services arrived. Ms. Kane was transported to Memorial Hospital. There it was in black and white. David Parker had pulled Lily from the river, had breathed life back into her when she stopped breathing, had stayed with her until the ambulance came. "There's more," Dutch said, pulling up another document. Hospital visitor log from that day. Elena Parker checked in to visit room 213, your sister's room, about 2 hours after the rescue. He looked up at Marcus. They went to see if she was okay. Marcus remembered that day in fragments. The panicked drive to the hospital. Lily pale and small in the hospital bed. The doctor explaining she would recover. He'd been so consumed with relief that he hadn't thought about who had saved her, or whether they might still be around. "They were there," Marcus said quietly. "They were in the hospital while I was there, and I never even knew who to thank." Dutch put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "The world has strange ways of bringing people together." Marcus stared at the documents. the undeniable proof that his path had crossed with the Parkers, long before Tommy appeared outside that diner. The people who had saved what was most precious to him were gone, and now their children needed him. The circle was complete. Dutch quietly closed the laptop and stepped outside to make another call, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too confined for the weight of what he'd just learned. Marcus pushed back from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the ring of motorcycles surrounding the property like a steel fence. The morning sun glinted off chrome and leather. Several riders patrolled the perimeter, alert and ready. Others were inside, cleaning weapons or playing with the kids. All of them had dropped everything to be here, trusting Marcus's call without question. That's what Brotherhood meant. But this wasn't just about Brotherhood anymore. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool glass. 5 years ago, David and Elena Parker had been hiking when they heard Lily's screams. They could have kept walking. Most people would have. Instead, David had jumped into frigid water, risked his own life, and pulled a stranger's child to safety. Elena had held Lily's hand until the ambulance arrived, whispering that everything would be okay. And Marcus had never known their names until today. He closed his eyes, remembering how Lily had looked in that hospital bed. So small, so fragile. The doctors said if she'd been underwater even 30 seconds longer, the brain damage would have been permanent. David Parker hadn't just saved Lily's life. He'd saved her future. "I never got to thank you," Marcus whispered to the empty room. Behind him came the soft sound of babbling. He turned to see Tommy in the doorway, holding one of the twins. The little girl was grabbing at her brother's nose, making him giggle. "She wanted to see you," Tommy said simply. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. He crossed the room and gently took the baby from Tommy's arms. She was warm and solid, her tiny fingers immediately latching onto his weathered thumb. "Which one is this?" Marcus asked. He still couldn't tell the twins apart. "This is Ellie," Tommy said. "She's the louder one. Anna's still sleeping." Ellie looked up at Marcus with dark eyes that somehow seemed wise beyond their months. Eyes like her mother's, he imagined, though he'd never seen Elena Parker's face. "Your mom and dad," Marcus said softly to Tommy. "They were heroes." Tommy nodded seriously. "Dad always said helping people was important, even when it's hard or scary." Marcus swallowed against the tightness in his throat. The Parker family had saved his sister without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return, without ever knowing that 5 years later, their paths would cross again in the most heartbreaking way. Some would call it coincidence. Marcus didn't believe in coincidences anymore. "Your parents saved someone very important to me once," he told Tommy. "My little sister. She was in trouble, and your dad jumped in to help her. Your mom stayed with her until she was safe." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? When?" "A long time ago, before you were born." Marcus adjusted Ellie in his arms. "I never got to thank them." Tommy seemed to consider this. "Maybe that's why you're helping us now. To say thank you." The simple wisdom of the child hit Marcus like a physical blow. Was that what this was? Some cosmic balancing of the scales? A chance to repay a debt he didn't even know he owed? No. It was more than that. Looking down at Ellie's tiny face, and at Tommy standing before him, Marcus understood with perfect clarity. This wasn't about debt, or destiny, or even gratitude. It was about continuing what the Parkers had started, a simple, human chain of caring that extended beyond blood and beyond borders. Their children weren't just a responsibility to Marcus now. They were a promise. "I'm going to keep you safe," he said, his voice low and fierce. "All of you, whatever it takes." Tommy reached up and took his free hand. "I know," he said simply. In that moment, standing in the safe house kitchen with Tommy's small hand in his, and Ellie cradled against his chest, Marcus felt the last of his emotional walls crumble. These children were his now, not just to protect, not just to avenge, but to love, to guide, to raise, if that's what it took. He would see this through to the end. For Lily, for the Parkers, for these 3 innocent lives that had somehow been entrusted to him, for the family he never knew he needed. That same afternoon, Marcus called a meeting in the safe house living room. The furniture had been pushed aside to make room for the 25 men crowded inside, their faces serious and attentive. The rest of their brotherhood maintained the perimeter, keeping watch in rotating shifts. "We've got enough intel now," Marcus said, unfolding a detailed map across the coffee table. "Time to move." Dutch, a former military strategist before joining the club, pointed to locations marked in red. "Based on what Tommy told us and our surveillance, they're operating out of these 3 buildings on the edge of town. Main headquarters is here." His finger tapped the largest circled area. "It's a warehouse with offices in the back. That's where their boss, Vitelli, runs things." Marcus nodded. Tommy recognized him from the photos. He's the one who gave the order. The boy had been remarkably brave during the identification process, looking through surveillance photos without flinching. Each positive ID had been another piece of the puzzle, another step toward justice. "What about the kids?" asked Razor, a burly rider with a surprisingly gentle way with the twins. "Jasper's taking them to the secondary location tonight," Marcus replied. "4 of our most trusted will go as escort. The rest of us focus on ending this threat for good." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each man. These weren't just his brothers in the club. They had become something more in the past few days. Protectors, caregivers, avengers. The transformation was visible in their determined expressions. "This isn't about revenge," Marcus continued, his voice level. "It's about justice. We gather evidence, document everything, and deliver it all to the right authorities. These men hurt children. They murdered parents. We're making sure they pay the legal way." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Not everyone was entirely happy with the nonviolent approach, but they respected Marcus enough to follow his lead. Dutch rolled out a second, more detailed map. "We'll split into 3 teams: surveillance, documentation, and security. No one goes in alone. No one takes unnecessary risks." He began assigning positions, his military background evident in the precision of his planning. Marcus watched as the men copied down details, checked weapons, and prepared equipment. Cameras with telephoto lenses, recording devices, communication systems that couldn't be traced or intercepted. "We move at dawn," Marcus said when Dutch finished. "That gives us 12 hours to prepare. Get some rest, check your gear, and be ready to ride at 4 a.m. The men dispersed, breaking into smaller groups to discuss their assignments. Marcus stepped outside onto the porch, needing a moment of quiet. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical thing. Tommy was sitting on the steps, bouncing a small rubber ball. He looked up as Marcus approached. "Are you going to get the bad men tomorrow?" he asked quietly. Marcus sat beside him. "We're going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else," he answered carefully. "The police will put them in jail for what they did to your parents." Tommy nodded, his small face solemn. "Dad always said there are consequences for bad choices." "Your dad was a wise man," Marcus replied, his throat tight. "I wish—" Tommy started, then paused, rolling the ball between his palms. "I wish they could see how you're helping us." Marcus put his arm around the boy's narrow shoulders. "I think they know, buddy. Somehow, I think they know." They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the afternoon sunlight filter through the trees. Then Marcus stood, squeezing Tommy's shoulder gently. "Time to get your things packed. Jasper's taking you and your sister somewhere even safer tonight. Will you come find us after?" The question held a universe of vulnerability. "Nothing could stop me," Marcus promised. Inside, the planning continued late into the evening. Maps were memorized, routes confirmed, contingencies established. Each man knew exactly what was expected of him. By midnight, they had a solid plan that minimized risk while maximizing their chances of success. At 3 in the morning, Marcus walked through the safe house one last time. The children had already been moved safely to the secondary location. The house felt emptier, without their presence, more like the operational base it had become. The men gathered outside, engines quiet as they prepared to move out. Dawn was still hours away, but they needed time to get into position, to become invisible shadows around the Mafia's operation. "Remember," Marcus said as they prepared to depart, "we're doing this for 3 children who deserve to grow up without looking over their shoulders. We do this right." 25 helmets nodded in unison. By 4:30 a.m., the teams were in position, hidden in the pre-dawn darkness around the 3 Mafia locations. Marcus checked his watch, then his radio. Each team reported ready, waiting for first light. The eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly. Marcus settled into his observation point with Dutch beside him, binoculars trained on the main warehouse entrance. They were positioned strategically, ready to act at dawn. First light crept across the eastern sky, painting the clouds in delicate strokes of pink and gold. Marcus checked his watch. 5:42 a.m. The city still slept, but the warehouse district was beginning to stir with early deliveries and night shift workers heading home. "All units in position," Marcus said into his radio, voice barely above a whisper. "Remember the plan. Document everything. No unnecessary risks." Confirmations came back in hushed tones. 25 men, positioned strategically around 3 buildings, all with clear assignments. From his vantage point on a neighboring rooftop, Marcus had a perfect view of the main warehouse. Through his binoculars, he watched as a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. 2 men stepped out, scanning the area before unlocking the bay doors. "Target 1 has arrived," Marcus reported. "Dutch, confirm visual." "Confirmed," came the reply. "That's Vitelli's right-hand man, Russo. Camera is rolling." Marcus felt a cold clarity settle over him. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about gathering evidence, about making sure these men faced justice for what they had done to Tommy's parents, for what they would have done to the children. Another vehicle arrived, a luxury sedan with tinted windows. The driver opened the rear door, and a well-dressed man emerged. "That's him," Marcus said. "Vitelli. Main target confirmed." "Got him on camera," Dutch replied. Clear shot of his face. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear similar reports coming in from the other teams. Mafia associates arriving at all 3 locations. Unaware they were being documented, their movements recorded, their conversations captured by long-range microphones. For 3 hours, they maintained their positions, gathering evidence. Shipments came and went. Money changed hands. Names were mentioned. Incriminating details discussed. The Mafia operated with the confidence of men who believed themselves untouchable. "Team 2 reports cash transfer at the south location," came a voice through the radio. "They're moving what looks like drugs into a panel van." "Keep recording," Marcus instructed. "Do not engage." At 9:17 a.m., Marcus spotted an opportunity. Vitelli and 3 associates entered the warehouse office through a side door, leaving only 2 guards outside. "Moving to Phase 2, Marcus said. "Teams hold positions until my signal." He and Dutch descended from their perch, moving silently toward the warehouse. Years of operating on the fringes of society had taught them how to become invisible when needed. They slipped past a delivery truck, using it as cover. The loading dock computer system was their target. If they could access it, they would have shipping records, customer information, everything needed to expose the entire operation. Dutch knelt beside the side entrance, picking the lock with practiced hands while Marcus kept watch. Within seconds, they were inside, moving through shadows toward the administrative office. The warehouse hummed with activity, but most workers stayed near the loading areas. Marcus and Dutch reached the empty office undetected. Dutch inserted a specialized drive into the computer, rapidly copying files, while Marcus photographed physical documents left carelessly on the desk. "Got it," Dutch whispered, after 3 tense minutes. "Complete download." Marcus nodded, photographing one last document, a ledger showing payments to corrupt officials. "This is everything we need." They slipped out as quietly as they had entered, rejoining the rest of their surveillance team. By 10 a.m., all teams reported mission complete. They had hours of video, audio recordings, photographs, and now computer records documenting the entire criminal enterprise. "Fall back to rendezvous point," Marcus ordered. "Bring all evidence." At an abandoned gas station 5 miles from the warehouse district, the teams regrouped. No one had been detected. No confrontations had occurred. They had moved like ghosts, gathering what they needed without alerting their targets. Marcus reviewed the evidence with Dutch and 2 others who had law enforcement backgrounds. What they had collected was overwhelming, proof not just of the murder of Tommy's parents, but of drug trafficking, weapon sales, and bribery. "It's time," Marcus said, picking up a burner phone. He dialed a number that Dutch had provided, a direct line to a federal prosecutor known for his integrity and determination. "I have evidence of organized crime operations that you're going to want to see," Marcus said when the call connected. "Multiple murders, including the Westfield couple last week. I can deliver everything to you, but I need assurances about 3 orphan children." He listened to the response, then nodded. "1 hour. I'll send location details by text." As he ended the call, Marcus looked around at his brothers. Men society had written off as criminals had just done what law enforcement couldn't, gathered decisive evidence against a dangerous mafia operation. "It's done," he told them. "Justice is coming." The afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Marcus guided his motorcycle along the winding back roads toward the safe house. The rumble of the engine beneath him felt different somehow, purposeful rather than restless. His mind kept replaying the morning's operation. They had done it. They had gathered the evidence needed to bring down Vitelli and his crew. He thought of Tommy and the twins waiting back at the safe house. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something close to peace. Not complete, not yet, but the beginning of it, like the first ray of sunlight after a storm. The federal prosecutor had been skeptical at first, but as soon as he'd reviewed the evidence, his demeanor had changed completely. The photos, recordings, financial records, it was all damning. Enough to secure indictments against the entire organization. The prosecutor had promised protection for the children and immunity for Marcus's crew in exchange for their testimony. "Almost home," Marcus murmured to himself as he turned onto the dirt road that led to the safe house. The word caught him by surprise. Home. When had he started thinking of the safe house that way? His radio crackled, pulling him from his thoughts. Dutch's voice came through, urgent and tight. "Marcus, come in. We have a situation." Marcus slowed his bike, pulling to the side of the road. "I'm here. What's happening?" "One of our spotters just called in. Vitelli's men are mobilizing. They're arming up, loading vehicles. Word is they know someone hit them this morning." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Do they know it was us?" "Not confirmed, but they're making calls, checking known locations. They've already hit 2 clubhouses, looking for someone. It's only a matter of time before they connect the dots or find a trail." "How much time do we have?" "Hours, maybe less. We've got to assume they'll find us." Marcus gunned the engine, gravel spraying as he accelerated. "I'm 10 minutes out. Get everyone on high alert, full defensive protocol." "Already on it. Patrols are doubled, and we're moving the kids to the secure room." As Marcus raced toward the safe house, his mind worked through scenarios, cataloging resources, mapping escape routes. The peace he'd felt moments earlier was gone, replaced by the cold focus of survival. He arrived to find the compound transformed. The lazy afternoon atmosphere had given way to organized intensity. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. Windows were being boarded. Vehicles were positioned as barriers at strategic points. Marcus parked his bike and strode quickly into the main house. He found Dutch in the kitchen, spreading maps across the table while coordinating with others via radio. "Where are the kids?" Marcus asked immediately. "With Lisa in the back room. Tommy's asking questions, but she's keeping him calm." Marcus nodded, relief washing through him. Lisa was one of their most level-headed members, a former combat medic. The kids would be safe with her for now. "What's our status?" he asked, leaning over the maps. "We've got 38 bodies on site, all armed. Perimeter is secure, but if they come in force..." Dutch's voice trailed off. "They will," Marcus said grimly. "Vitelli won't send a small crew. He'll want to make a statement." He studied the maps, mentally noting choke points and vulnerabilities. The safe house had been chosen for its defensibility, isolated, with clear sightlines and limited approach routes. But it wasn't a fortress. "We need to be ready to move the children if necessary," Marcus said. "Have 3 vehicles prepped and hidden in the tree line. Different directions, different destinations." Dutch nodded, relaying the orders via radio. A younger rider burst into the room, breathless. "Marcus, we just intercepted radio chatter. They've identified our location. Multiple vehicles heading this way from the east." Marcus checked his watch. "How many?" "At least 4 that we confirmed. Possibly more behind them." "Time estimate?" 30 minutes, maybe less if they push it." Marcus straightened. Decision made. "We hold position. The evidence is already with the feds. They're moving on Vitelli's operation as we speak. We just need to survive until they wrap up their raids." He turned to the gathered men. Their faces showed determination, not fear. These were men who had lived their lives on the edge, who understood risk and loyalty. "I need our best shooters on the roof. Set up in pairs, overlapping fields of fire. Everyone else forms a defensive perimeter. No one gets through to the kids." As the men moved to their positions, Marcus headed to the back room. He needed to see Tommy and the twins, needed to reassure himself they were safe. The safe house hummed with tense activity as men checked weapons and communications, moved furniture for cover, and watched the approaches through binoculars. Outside, the peaceful countryside seemed to hold its breath, unaware of the violence about to break its silence. Dusk settled over the safe house as the first shots rang out. The crack, crack, crack of gunfire shattered the tense silence they'd been holding for hours. Marcus was in the main room when it started, reviewing defensive positions with Dutch and Razor. "They're here!" shouted a voice from the front windows. "4 vehicles, coming fast!" Marcus moved quickly to Tommy and the twins, who were huddled with Lisa in the back room. Tommy's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. The twins slept peacefully in makeshift cribs, unaware of the danger. "It's going to get loud," Marcus told Tommy, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Stay with Lisa. Do exactly what she tells you." Tommy nodded bravely, though his chin trembled. "Like we practiced?" "Just like we practiced." Marcus squeezed the boy's shoulder. "You're doing great, buddy." Outside, engines roared as vehicles screeched to stops around the property. Car doors slammed, men shouted. More gunfire erupted, this time from the safe house as the bikers on the roof engaged. Marcus hurried back to the main room, grabbing his shotgun from behind the couch. Through the windows, he could see dark figures moving through the trees, working their way closer. "They're trying to flank us from the west side," called one of the bikers on the roof. Dutch grabbed his radio. "Bear, take 4 men and secure the west entrance. Nobody gets through." Marcus positioned himself near the front door, peering through a narrow gap in the boarded window. The Mafia enforcers moved with military precision, using trees and vehicles for cover. These weren't street thugs. They were professional killers. Glass shattered somewhere in the back of the house. A woman screamed. Gunfire erupted inside. "They're in the east wing!" Razor shouted. "I've got it," Marcus said, already moving. "Hold the front!" He ran down the hallway, shotgun raised. Turning the corner, he saw two men in black tactical gear moving toward the kitchen. They hadn't seen him yet. Marcus fired twice. Both men went down hard. More glass broke above him. Someone had entered through an upstairs window. Footsteps pounded overhead, moving toward the staircase. "They're upstairs!" Marcus shouted into his radio. 3 bikers appeared beside him, guns ready. Marcus nodded toward the staircase. "Clear the second floor. I'm checking on the kids." Heart pounding, Marcus made his way back to the safe room. The gunfire was intensifying, coming from all directions now. The house shuddered as something exploded outside. He found Lisa and the children still secure, but fear showed plainly on Lisa's face. "We can't stay here," Marcus said. "They're coming in from too many directions." Lisa nodded, already gathering essentials for the twins. "The tunnel." "Yeah, get them ready." Behind a bookcase in the room's corner was a narrow passage that led to a storm cellar and eventually to the woods behind the property. They'd prepared it as a last resort. Marcus helped Lisa pack the babies into carriers. Tommy stood ready with his small backpack, trying to look brave despite the tears in his eyes. "Listen to me," Marcus said to Tommy. "You need to be extra brave now. Help Lisa with your sisters. I'll catch up with you as soon as I can." A massive crash from the front of the house told him the main door had given way. Shouts and gunfire erupted in the main room. "Go now!" Marcus urged them toward the tunnel entrance. As Lisa disappeared with the twins, Tommy hesitated. "What about you?" the boy asked. Marcus gave him a reassuring smile. "I'll be right behind you. Go on now." As Tommy disappeared into the darkness, Marcus slid the bookcase back into position. He turned just as the door to the safe room burst open. 2 enforcers rushed in, weapons raised. Marcus fired his shotgun, catching the first man squarely in the chest. The second fired back. Marcus felt a searing pain in his side as the bullet tore through him. He staggered but managed to squeeze off another shot that sent the second enforcer crumpling to the floor. Warm blood soaked through his shirt. Marcus pressed his hand against the wound, gritting his teeth against the pain. He needed to buy more time for Lisa and the children to get safely away. More footsteps approached. Marcus positioned himself in front of the hidden tunnel entrance, shotgun ready, despite the blood dripping between his fingers. The room swayed around him, but he planted his feet firmly. "Come on," he muttered. "Let's dance." The door crashed open again. Marcus fired, then felt another bullet slam into his shoulder, spinning him around. He fell hard against the bookcase, sliding down to the floor. Through dimming vision, he saw the tunnel entrance remained hidden. The children were safe for now. As darkness crept in from the edges of his vision, that single thought brought him peace. The moon cast long shadows through the broken windows of the safe house. 4 hours had passed since the attack ended. The mafia enforcers had retreated, leaving behind their dead and wounded after the authorities had been alerted. Police and ambulances had come and gone, taking statements and treating the less severely injured. Inside the damaged living room, Marcus lay on a makeshift bed of couch cushions. His skin was pale against his dark beard, his breathing shallow but steady. Dutch had patched him up as best he could. Marcus had refused to go to the hospital, knowing it would separate him from the children. "You're one stubborn son of a gun," Dutch muttered, replacing the blood-soaked bandage on Marcus's side. "Bullet went clean through, but you lost a lot of blood. The one in your shoulder's worse." Marcus winced as Dutch secured the fresh bandage. "I've had worse." Lisa approached with a glass of water and pills. "Take these," she ordered. "They'll help with the pain." The safe house was in shambles. Broken glass littered the floors. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls. The front door hung from a single hinge. But they had held. Most importantly, the children were safe. Tommy sat cross-legged on the floor beside Marcus, his small face tense with worry. He hadn't left Marcus's side since they'd returned to the safe house. The twins slept nearby in their carriers, miraculously undisturbed by the commotion around them. "You should get some sleep, buddy," Marcus told Tommy, his voice rough with pain. "It's late." Tommy shook his head firmly. "I'm staying with you." Razor entered the room, his imposing figure silhouetted against the kitchen light. "Perimeter's secure. Got 10 men watching the property in shifts." He knelt beside Marcus. "How you holding up, boss?" "I'll live," Marcus said, attempting to sit up. Pain shot through his side, and he fell back with a grunt. "Stay down," Dutch warned. "Those stitches will tear if you move too much." Across the room, several bikers were boarding up windows and clearing debris. Others maintained watch positions at strategic points throughout the house. Despite their rough appearances, they moved with purpose and concern. Lisa brought Tommy a blanket. "Try to rest, sweetheart. Marcus needs to rest too." Tommy took the blanket, but made no move to lie down. Instead, he carefully spread it across Marcus's legs. "You might get cold," he explained seriously. Marcus felt something catch in his throat at the boy's gesture. "Thanks, kid." "The cops said they caught 2 of the guys who attacked us," Razor reported quietly. "The evidence we gathered earlier today was enough to get warrants for the rest. They're closing in on the whole operation." Marcus nodded, relief washing through him despite the pain. "So, it's almost over." "Looks that way," Dutch agreed. "By this time tomorrow, those kids should be officially safe." Tommy's eyes widened at this news. "What happens to us then?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. The question hung in the air. Nobody had discussed what would come after. Child services would inevitably get involved. The twins and Tommy would need permanent homes. "Let's worry about that tomorrow," Marcus said gently. "One thing at a time." Lisa brought Tommy a pillow. "Try to sleep a little, honey, just for a while." Tommy took the pillow, but placed it beside Marcus, rather than using it himself. "I'm not leaving him," he insisted, his chin jutting out stubbornly. Lisa exchanged a look with Dutch, then nodded. "All right, but just rest there beside him, okay?" As midnight passed, the safe house gradually quieted. Bikers took shifts, standing guard, while others caught what sleep they could on chairs and floors. The twins woke once for bottles, then settled back to sleep. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication making everything hazy. Each time he opened his eyes, Tommy was there, watchful and awake. "You should sleep," Marcus murmured during one such moment. Tommy shook his head. "You saved me and my sisters," he whispered, "so I'm going to watch over you now." Marcus felt the boy's small hand slip into his own. The simple trust of the gesture made his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere," Tommy promised, his voice fierce with determination, despite his exhaustion. "I'm staying right here." Despite the pain, despite the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. The boy's unwavering loyalty touched something deep inside him that he thought had died long ago. As dawn approached, Tommy finally succumbed to exhaustion, his head resting against Marcus's uninjured shoulder. But even in sleep, he refused to let go of Marcus's hand. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the boarded-up windows, casting striped shadows across the safe-house floor. Marcus opened his eyes slowly, the pain in his side less intense, but still throbbing with each breath. Tommy remained curled up against him, his small hand still clutching Marcus's larger one, even in sleep. A phone rang somewhere in the kitchen. Marcus heard Razor's gruff voice answering, followed by a hurried conversation. Footsteps approached, and Razor appeared in the doorway, his expression lighter than it had been in days. "That was Detective Reynolds," Razor said quietly, mindful of the sleeping boy. They've been working all night with the evidence we gathered. 3 more arrests already, including the local boss. Marcus nodded, relief washing through him. Any word on how far it goes? They found a laptop with records, names, dates, locations, everything. The whole network's coming down. Razor's usual stern face broke into a rare smile. It's happening, boss. It's really happening. Dutch entered from the back of the house, a fresh coffee in hand. Just got word from our guys watching the city locations. Police raids everywhere. They're hitting all the spots the kid remembered. Tommy stirred at the voices, rubbing his eyes with small fists, before remembering where he was. He immediately looked to Marcus with concern in his eyes. "Morning, buddy," Marcus said, his voice rough but steady. "You sleep okay?" Tommy nodded, then looked anxiously at the bandages visible beneath Marcus's torn shirt. "Are you still hurt bad?" "I'm tougher than I look," Marcus assured him, though the effort of speaking made him wince slightly. "Just need a little time to heal up." Lisa appeared with a tray holding a glass of water and more pain medication. "How's our patient this morning?" "Stubborn as ever," Dutch answered for him. Outside, the sound of vehicles approaching caused everyone to tense. Razor moved quickly to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. "Police," he reported. "Detective Reynolds and a couple of squad cars." Tommy's hand tightened on Marcus's. "Are they going to take us away?" Marcus squeezed the boy's hand reassuringly. "Let's see what they have to say first." Detective Reynolds entered a few minutes later, looking tired but satisfied. A female officer accompanied him, along with a woman in civilian clothes who carried a folder of documents. "Mr. Kane?" Reynolds nodded to Marcus. "Good to see you're still with us. Heard you took a couple bullets protecting these kids." "What's the situation?" Marcus asked, bypassing the comment. Reynolds's face broke into a genuine smile. "It's better than we could have hoped. The evidence you provided was the final piece we needed. We've made 27 arrests since midnight. The entire regional operation is in handcuffs." The woman in civilian clothes stepped forward. "Mr. Kane, I'm Sarah Lenton from Child Protective Services. We understand the exceptional circumstances here." She smiled kindly at Tommy. "You've been very brave, young man." Tommy pressed closer to Marcus, his face half hidden behind Marcus's arm. "The children will need to be placed in protective custody while we sort out permanent arrangements," she continued. "However, given the circumstances and their attachment to you, we're willing to be flexible about visitation during the transition." "What about their safety?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with concern. "The threat has been neutralized," Reynolds assured him. "We've got the entire network, including the men who specifically targeted their family. The children can start fresh without looking over their shoulders." Tommy's grip on Marcus's hand became almost painfully tight. "I don't want to go," he whispered, his voice breaking. Marcus looked down at the boy's frightened face. Despite his own pain and weakness, he found the strength to sit up slightly, meeting Tommy's eyes directly. "Listen to me," he said softly, his rough voice gentler than anyone in the room had ever heard it. "You remember what I taught you about being brave?" Tommy nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Marcus continued. "It means you keep going even when you are scared. You've already shown more courage than most grown men I know." A tear slipped down Tommy's cheek. Marcus reached up with his good arm and wiped it away with his thumb. "These people are going to keep you and your sisters safe while I get better," Marcus told him. "And I promise you, I promise, this isn't goodbye. I'm not going anywhere. You understand me?" Tommy nodded again, trying to be brave despite his trembling lip. "You stay strong for your sisters," Marcus said. "They need their big brother right now, and I need you to be strong too." "Can you do that for me?" Tommy straightened his small shoulders, making a visible effort to pull himself together. "I can be strong," he said, his voice still shaky but determined. Late afternoon light cast long shadows across the city as Detective Reynolds stood in the command center, surrounded by maps and surveillance photos. The operation had been in motion since dawn, but the main strike was scheduled for exactly 5 p.m., when the target locations would be most vulnerable. "All units, report ready," a communications officer announced, headset pressed to her ear. Reynolds nodded grimly. "Remember, we're dealing with dangerous individuals. Proceed with extreme caution." He glanced at the clock. 4:58 p.m. 2 minutes to go. Across town, unmarked police vehicles idled in strategic positions surrounding 5 key mafia strongholds. SWAT teams crouched in formation, weapons ready but not yet visible to passers-by or potential lookouts. At the safe house, Marcus sat propped up in bed, his phone on speaker as Dutch provided updates from his position near the main mafia headquarters. "They're moving into position," Dutch reported, his voice low and tense. "Looks like they've got the whole block surrounded." Tommy sat quietly beside Marcus, his eyes wide as he listened. He had insisted on staying close, and Marcus hadn't had the heart to send him away. The twins slept peacefully in their makeshift cribs across the room, blissfully unaware of the operation unfolding miles away. "Good," Marcus replied, wincing slightly as he shifted position. "What about the dockside warehouse?" "Razor's there with his team. Says police boats are approaching from the waterside, while tactical teams cover the land entry points." The clock struck 5:08 p.m. "They're moving in," Dutch whispered urgently. "Going radio silent." Across the city, the raids began simultaneously. At the Mafia's main office building, disguised as an import-export business, SWAT teams breached 3 entrances at once. Flashbang grenades disoriented those inside, as officers stormed each floor with practiced precision. "Police! On the ground now!" The commands echoed through marble hallways, as men in expensive suits found themselves face down on polished floors, hands zip-tied behind their backs. At the warehouse by the docks, the operation met stiffer resistance. Gunfire erupted as guards spotted the approaching officers. But the police had the advantage of surprise and superior numbers. Within minutes, the shooting stopped, replaced by the methodical process of securing prisoners and evidence. "Central location secure," came the first report over the police radio. 14 suspects in custody, including Salvatore Ricci. Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. Ricci was the local underboss. Capturing him was a major victory. "Warehouse secured," reported another team leader. 3 officers with minor injuries, all suspects in custody. "We've found what looks like their main distribution center. Evidence team is documenting everything." One by one, each target reported success. The nightclub that served as the money laundering hub. The private garage where they modified vehicles for smuggling. The luxury apartment complex where several high-ranking members lived. All secured, all yielding arrests and evidence. Back at the safe house, Marcus listened intently to each update Dutch relayed. Tommy's hand remained firmly in his, squeezing tighter with each new development. "They got them all?" Tommy asked quietly, after Dutch reported the 5th and final location secured. Marcus nodded, squeezing the boy's hand. "Sounds like it, buddy. The police did good work today." "What about the bad men who hurt my mom and dad?" Tommy's voice trembled slightly. Marcus looked into the child's eyes, seeing both fear and hope. "Remember those names you told us? The ones you heard that night?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "Detective Reynolds said they arrested those exact men this morning. They're in jail now, and they're going to stay there for a very long time." Relief washed over Tommy's face, followed quickly by something Marcus recognized: the first tentative steps toward closure. The boy didn't smile, but some of the tension left his small shoulders. At police headquarters, Reynolds watched as processing teams photographed, fingerprinted, and logged each suspect. The operation had netted 63 arrests in total, decimating the Mafia's regional hierarchy. Computer specialists were already mining the seized laptops and phones, uncovering evidence that would lead to even more arrests in the coming days. "Sir," A junior officer approached, holding a tablet. Preliminary ballistics report on the weapons recovered from the warehouse. She handed him the device. 2 matches confirmed to the murders of the Mitchell family. Reynolds nodded grimly. Make sure that evidence is secured with extra precautions. I want those charges to stick. As night fell over the city, the immediate threat that had hung over 3 small children was finally, conclusively eliminated. The mafia operation that had murdered their parents and hunted them for what they might have witnessed lay in ruins. The safe house buzzed with a different energy that evening. Gone was the tension that had gripped them all for days. In its place hung something unfamiliar but welcome, relief, maybe even peace. Riders moved about with lighter steps. Conversations flowed more freely. Occasional laughter punctuated the air. Marcus sat on the front porch, in a worn rocking chair, his bandaged side still tender, but healing. The pain medication had taken the edge off, allowing him to move from his bed to enjoy the cool evening breeze. The sunset painted the sky in gentle oranges and pinks, a stark contrast to the violence that had marked their lives recently. Inside, Bear, a mountain of a man with a surprisingly delicate touch, had prepared a feast to celebrate. The long wooden table overflowed with food: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob, and 3 apple pies cooling by the window. It wasn't fancy, but it was hearty and made with care. "Dinner's up," Bear called, his deep voice carrying through the house and out to the porch. The safe house transformed into something that felt remarkably like a home. Bikers filled plates and found seats wherever they could. At the table, on couches, even cross-legged on the floor. Tommy sat between Dutch and Razor, already looking comfortable as he reached for a chicken leg. "Careful, it's hot," Dutch warned, helping the boy balance his overflowing plate. Marcus watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame. This strange family they'd formed wasn't perfect, but it worked. Men who had spent years hardening themselves against the world now argued good-naturedly over who would get the corner piece of pie. The twins were awake and content in a playpen nearby, freshly changed and fed. One of them, Lily, the one with the tiny birthmark near her ear, cooed happily while kicking her feet in the air. Her sister Emma watched everything with wide, curious eyes. "You should eat something," Razor said, noticing Marcus in the doorway. "Bear made enough to feed an army." Marcus nodded and made his way to the table. Tommy immediately abandoned his seat to follow, carrying his plate. "Can I sit with you?" the boy asked, looking up at Marcus with those solemn eyes that somehow seemed a little lighter now. "Sure thing, buddy." They found a quiet corner where Marcus could rest his injured side against a cushioned chair. Tommy settled beside him, suddenly very focused on cutting his chicken into tiny pieces. "Is it really over?" Tommy asked quietly, not looking up from his plate. Marcus considered his answer carefully. "The bad people who hurt your parents are going to jail for a very long time. You and your sisters are safe now. What happens to us next?" It was the question Marcus had been turning over in his mind all day. Child Services would want to place the children somewhere permanent. There would be paperwork, evaluations, maybe even court appearances. "We'll figure it out," Marcus said, resting his hand on Tommy's small shoulder. "But no matter what, you won't be alone." Tommy nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer for now. As the evening wound down, riders began to clean up or step outside for a smoke. The energy in the house shifted from celebration to contentment. Some riders would head out in the morning, returning to their regular lives now that the immediate danger had passed. Marcus made his way back to the porch, needing a moment of quiet. Tommy followed, dragging a blanket behind him. "Cold?" Marcus asked. "It's for the babies," Tommy explained. Marcus watched as the boy carefully laid the blanket on the porch swing. He disappeared inside and returned moments later with both twins, one cradled in each arm, walking slowly and carefully. "I got them," he said proudly. "You sure did," Marcus replied, moving to help him settle on the swing. "You're a good big brother." The four of them sat together as night settled fully around the safe house. Emma drifted off to sleep quickly, her tiny fist curled around Marcus's finger. Lily stayed awake longer, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tommy leaned against Marcus's good side, his small body warm and trusting. "My dad used to say that brave people are just scared people who do the right thing anyway," Tommy whispered. "I think you're the bravest person I ever met." Marcus felt something catch in his throat. He looked down at these three children who had crashed into his life and somehow found their way past every wall he'd built. "Your dad sounds like a smart man," Marcus said softly. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too," Tommy said, his voice small but steady. "But I'm glad I met you." They sat together in comfortable silence as crickets began their evening chorus, four unlikely souls finding peace in each other's company. Morning light streamed through the windows of the safe house, painting the worn wooden floors with golden patches. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee warming his hands. The paperwork spread before him looked official and intimidating. Forms from Child Protective Services, temporary guardianship applications, statements about the children's situation. "These folks sure love their paperwork," Dutch commented, refilling his own mug. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the documents. "Says here they'll need to evaluate the living situation before making any permanent decisions." After breakfast, a social worker named Ms. Parker was scheduled to arrive. She had been briefed about the unusual circumstances and was coming to assess the children's well-being and discuss next steps. Marcus had spent half the night wondering what that might mean. In the living room, Tommy was helping Razor change the twins. The boy had become surprisingly skilled at diaper changing, his little face serious with concentration as he handed over wipes and powder. "Looking good, little man," Razor said, fastening the last tab on Emma's diaper. "You're a natural." Tommy beamed with pride, carefully lifting Lily for his turn. "Marcus showed me how." The mention of his name made Marcus look up from the paperwork. Something had shifted between him and the boy, a bond formed through danger and trust that felt unbreakable now. When the doorbell rang at precisely 10 o'clock, the mood in the safe house tensed. Ms. Parker turned out to be a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't blink at the sight of tattooed bikers milling about, instead focusing immediately on the children. "Mr. Kane," she said, shaking Marcus's hand firmly. "I've been briefed on the situation. Quite extraordinary circumstances." They sat in the small study off the main living area, the door open so Marcus could keep an eye on Tommy and the twins. "The children appear well cared for," Ms. Parker noted, writing something in her notebook. "Tommy seems attached to you." "We've been through a lot together," Marcus replied simply. Ms. Parker nodded. "I understand you're requesting to remain involved in their lives?" "More than involved," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the nervousness he felt. "I want to apply for permanent guardianship." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus hadn't shared this decision with anyone yet, not even his fellow riders. It had come to him during the night as he'd watched over the sleeping children. This certainty that he couldn't let them go. "That's a significant commitment, Mr. Kane," Ms. Parker said carefully. "These children have experienced severe trauma. They'll need stability, routine, proper support. I understand that." "Your lifestyle will change," Marcus interrupted. "Already has." Ms. Parker studied him, her expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "The process isn't quick or easy. There would be home studies, background checks, parenting classes. I'll do whatever it takes." She closed her notebook. "I believe you would. For now, we can arrange temporary guardianship while the permanent application is processed. The children need stability immediately, and moving them to another temporary placement would only add trauma." Relief washed over Marcus. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A chance to prove he could be what these kids needed. After Ms. Parker left, Marcus found Tommy sitting on the front porch steps, watching the driveway with worried eyes. "Is the nice lady going to take us away?" Tommy asked as Marcus lowered himself onto the step beside him. "No, buddy. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday." Marcus put his arm around the boy's thin shoulders. "I've asked to be your guardian. That means I'd take care of you and your sisters from now on. If that's okay with you." Tommy's eyes widened. "Like, forever?" "That's the plan," Marcus said. "We'd need to find a proper house, and I'd have to learn a lot about taking care of kids. But we'd be together." Tommy was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry. Maybe the boy didn't want this. Maybe he'd rather have a normal family, with a mother and father in a nice suburban house with a white picket fence. Then Tommy turned and threw his arms around Marcus's neck, hugging him so tightly it made his injured side twinge. Marcus didn't care. He held the boy close, feeling something healing inside himself that had been broken for far too long. "Does this mean," Tommy whispered against Marcus's shoulder, "that you're my family now?" Marcus swallowed hard, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, Tommy, that's exactly what it means. We're family now. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day."